January 1st. Discover your calling. Everyone holds his fortune in his own hands. Like a sculptor, the raw material he will fashion into a figure. But it's the same with that type of artistic activity as with all others. We are merely born with the capability to do it. The skill to mold the material into what we want must be learned and attentively cultivated. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. You possess a kind of inner force that seeks to guide you toward your life's task, what you are meant to accomplish in the time that you have to live. In childhood, this force was clear to you. It directed you toward activities and subjects that fit your natural inclinations, that sparked a curiosity that was deep and primal. In the intervening years, the force tends to fade in and out as you listen more to parents and peers, to the daily anxieties that wear away at you. This can be the source of your unhappiness, your lack of connection to who you are and what makes you unique. The first move toward mastery is always inward, learning who you really are and reconnecting with that innate force. Knowing it with clarity, you will find your way to the proper career path and everything else will fall into place. It is never too late to start this process. Daily law, mastery is a process and discovering your calling is the starting point. Mastery, discover your calling, the life's task. January 2nd. Reconnect with your childhood obsession. When Marie Curie, the future discoverer of radium, was 4 years old, she wandered into her father's study and stood transfixed before a glass case that contained all kinds of laboratory instruments for chemistry and physics experiments. She would return to that room again and again to stare at the instruments, imagining all sorts of experiments she could conduct with these tubes and measuring devices. Years later, when she entered a real laboratory for the first time and did some experiments herself, she reconnected immediately with her childhood obsession. She knew she had found her vocation. Daily law, you were obsessed with it as a child for a reason. Reconnect with it. Mastery, discover your calling, the life's task. January 3rd. The voice. The way to recover the meaning of life and the worthwhileness of life is to recover the power of experience, to have impulse voices from within, and to be able to hear these impulse voices from within. Abraham Maslow. From the time I was young, I was entranced with words. I can remember in the 4th grade the teacher did this activity where she put up the word carpenter, and she asked us to come up with as many words as we could with just those letters. Ant, pet, car, etc. And I just thought, wow. You mean you can take letters like this and recombine them into words? I was entranced. These childhood attractions are hard to put into words. Abraham Maslow called it impulse voices. He noticed that children know exactly what they like and dislike from a very early age. It is extremely human and powerful. You had those impulse voices too. You hated this kind of activity and you loved that other one. You didn't like math but you were drawn to words. You were exhilarated by certain kinds of books and fell promptly asleep with other kinds. The importance of recognizing these early inclinations is that they are clear indications of an attraction that is not infected by the desires of other people. They are not something embedded in you by your parents, which come with a more superficial connection, something more verbal and conscious. Coming instead from somewhere deeper, these inclinations can only be your own, reflections of your unique chemistry. Daily law, do something today that you used to love doing as a kid. Try to reconnect with your impulse voices. Robert Greene in Conversation at Live Talks Los Angeles, February 11, 2019. January 4th. It is already within you. Sooner or later something seems to call us onto a particular path. You may remember this something as a signal calling in childhood when an urge out of nowhere, a fascination, a peculiar turn of events struck like an annunciation. This is what I must do. This is what I've got to have. This is who I am. James Hillman. As you become more sophisticated, you often lose touch with these signals from your primal core. They can be buried beneath all of the other subjects you have studied. Your power and future can depend on reconnecting with this core and returning to your origins. You must dig for signs of such inclinations in your earliest years. Look for its traces in visceral reactions to something simple, a desire to repeat an activity that you never tired of, a subject that stimulated an unusual degree of curiosity, feelings of power attached to particular actions. It is already there within you. You have nothing to create, you merely need to dig and refine what has been buried inside of you all along. If you reconnect with this core at any age, some element of that primitive attraction will spark back to life, indicating a path that can ultimately become your life's task. Daily Law: ask someone who recalls your childhood what they remember about your interests. Get reacquainted with those early passions. Mastery: I discover your calling, the life's task. January 5th. Know what you're drawn to and immerse yourself in it. The contemporary anthropologist-linguist Daniel Everett grew up on the California-Mexico border, in a cowboy town. From a very early age, he found himself drawn to the Mexican culture around him. Everything about it fascinated him: the sound of the words spoken by the migrant workers, the food, the manners that were so different from the Anglo world. He immersed himself as much as he could in their language and culture. This would transform into a lifelong interest in the other, the diversity of cultures on the planet and what that means about our evolution. Daily Law: what's something you've always felt a pull toward? Dive deep into it today. Mastery: I discover your calling, the life's task. January 6th. Change is the law. In dealing with your career and its inevitable changes, you must think in the following way: you are not tied to a particular position, your loyalty is not to a career or a company. You are committed to your life's task, to giving it full expression. It is up to you to find it and guide it correctly. It is not up to others to protect or help you. You are on your own. Change is inevitable, particularly in such a revolutionary moment as ours. Since you are on your own, it is up to you to foresee the changes going on right now in your profession. You must adapt your life's task to these circumstances. You do not hold on to past ways of doing things, because that will ensure you will fall behind and suffer for it. You are flexible and always looking to adapt. If change is forced upon you, you must resist the temptation to overreact or feel sorry for yourself. Before he became the great boxing trainer, Freddie Roach was forced to retire from boxing. He instinctively found his way back to the ring because he understood that what he loved was not boxing per se, but competitive sports and strategizing. Thinking in this way, he could adapt his inclinations to a new direction within boxing. Like Roach, you don't want to abandon the skills and experience you have gained, but to find a new way to apply them. Your eye is on the future, not the past. Often such creative readjustments lead to a superior path for us. We are shaken out of our complacency and forced to reassess where we are headed. Daily Law: adapt your inclinations. Avoid having rigid goals and dreams. Change is the law. Mastery: I discover your calling, the life's task. January 7th. Money and success. For many people, the pursuit of money and status can supply them with plenty of motivation and focus. Such types would consider figuring out their calling in life a monumental waste of time and an antiquated notion. But in the long run this philosophy often yields the most impractical of results. We all know the effects of hyperintention. If we want and need desperately to sleep, we are less likely to fall asleep. If we absolutely must give the best talk possible at some conference, we become hyper-anxious about the result, and the performance suffers. If we desperately need to find an intimate partner or make friends, we are more likely to push them away. If instead we relax and focus on other things, we are more likely to fall asleep or give a great talk or charm people. The most pleasurable things in life occur as a result of something not directly intended and expected. When we try to manufacture happy moments, they tend to disappoint us. The same goes for the dogged pursuit of money and success. Many of the most successful, famous, and wealthy individuals do not begin with an obsession with money and status. One prime example would be Steve Jobs, who amassed quite a fortune in his relatively short life. He actually cared very little for material possessions. His singular focus was on creating the best and the most original designs, and when he did so, good fortune followed him. Daily Law: concentrate on maintaining a high sense of purpose, and the success will flow to you naturally. The Laws of Human Nature, 13, advance with a sense of purpose, the law of aimlessness. January 8. Occupy your own niche. As a child growing up in Madras, India, in the late 1950s, V.S. Ramachandran knew he was different. In his loneliness he would often wander along the beach, and soon he became fascinated by the incredible variety of seashells that washed up on shore. He began to collect them and study the subject in detail. Soon he was drawn to the strangest varieties of seashells, such as the xenophora, an organism that collects discarded shells and uses them for camouflage. In a way, he was like the xenophora, an anomaly. In nature, these anomalies often serve a larger evolutionary purpose. They can lead to the occupation of new ecological niches, offering a greater chance of survival. Over the years, he transferred this boyhood interest into other subjects: human anatomical abnormalities, peculiar phenomena in chemistry, and so on. He went to medical school, then became a professor in visual psychology at the University of California at San Diego. He became intrigued by the phenomenon of phantom limbs, people who have had an arm or leg amputated and yet still feel a paralyzing pain in the missing limb. He proceeded to conduct experiments on phantom limb subjects. These experiments led to some exciting discoveries about the brain itself, as well as a novel way to relieve such patients of their pain. Studying anomalous neurological disorders would be the subject to which he could devote the rest of his life. It was as if he had come full circle to the days of collecting the rarest forms of seashells. Daily law: embrace your strangeness. Identify what makes you different. Fuse those things together and become an anomaly. Mastery: I discover your calling, the life's task. January 9th. Find inspiration from your heroes. As a young boy growing up in North Carolina, John Coltrane felt different and strange. He was much more serious than his schoolmates. He experienced emotional and spiritual longings he did not know how to verbalize. He drifted into music more as a hobby, taking up the saxophone and playing in his high school band. Then a few years later he saw the great jazz saxophonist Charlie Bird Parker perform live, and the sounds Parker produced touched Coltrane to the core. Something primal and personal came through Parker's saxophone, a voice from deep within. Coltrane suddenly saw the means for expressing his uniqueness and giving a voice to his own spiritual longings. He began to practice the instrument with such intensity that within a decade he transformed himself into perhaps the greatest jazz artist of his era. You must understand the following: in order to master a field, you must love the subject and feel a profound connection to it. Your interest must transcend the field and border on the religious. For Coltrane, it was not music but giving voice to powerful emotions. Daily law: are there people whose work affects you in a powerful way? Analyze this and use them as models. Mastery: I discover your calling, the life's task. January 10th. Embrace your weirdness. The most courageous act is still to think for yourself. Coco Chanel. What do we say about masters? They're one of a kind. There's never been a Steve Jobs ever before. There's never been a Warren Buffett. There's never been an Albert Einstein. They're unique. They embraced what made them different. Yes, it comes with some pain. With my books, particularly the 48 Laws of Power, you might hate it, you might think it's satanic, but I can guarantee you've never read or seen a book that looks like it. The sections I created, the opening paragraphs, the quotes on the sides, the shapes, the book reflects me and my weirdness. The publisher was frightened by it. They wanted a more conventional book. And I said, no. I know I've never published anything before, but I'm sticking to what I have here. I stuck to what was weird and strange about me. Daily law: always stick to what makes you weird, odd, strange, different. That's your source of power. Podcast interview. Curious with Josh Peck. December 4, 2018.